Hey everybody, this is John for MTG Nexus with Modern's top 5 decks going into January of 2024. Happy New Year, and welcome to the same old Modern. So, the hope was that the banning of Fury and Up the Beanstalk would shake up the format. To a certain degree it did. Rakdos Scam is no longer the top deck of the format, and Omnath is basically ceased to exist as a deck. Kind of similar to what happened to Creativity after the One Ring and Orcish Bowmasters and such were printed into the format. When I was talking about the bannings, I did say that a couple of things were going to happen, and they were rather easy to read in the room, and that was, number one, Amulet Titan or Yawgmoth would become the best deck in the format, and that Scam may not be completely dead. Now, I did underestimate how much Scam would come back, so I'm not saying that I got things completely 100% right, but the format was fairly easy to read. So, top deck of the month is Amulet Titan. This deck is one of the few decks in the top that didn't take a hit of any kind. It was kind of being held down a little bit by Scam because of the Scam openings could really disrupt this deck, and Scam was a Blood Moon deck that could attack this deck. Now this deck does have some difficult matchups, whether it be Murktide Regent, Living End can be a little bit tricky game one. There are a few decks that can attack it, but this deck does broken things. Basically, you're casting the One Ring a lot of times on turn 2, or Primeval Titan on turn 3, and it's just kind of GG from there. There's also the possibility of turn 2 Titans. This deck just has a lot of built-in redundancy with Urza Saga and Amulet, and then you have your various accelerators with Arboreal Grazer, Dryad, Azusa, and then the One Ring just kind of ties it all together. A slot that used to be sometimes Karn, used to be Explorers and stuff, now is just very simply the One Ring, and the deck has no true weaknesses other than a little bit of inconsistency with lack of card selection, with no longer running cards like Ancient Stirrings or anything like that. But you do have so many tutors in the form of Teleria Wests and Urza Sagas and Amulets and Expedition Maps and Primeval Titan being able to tutor up your lands, and this deck is basically the best deck. It's the most powerful deck, it's the fastest deck. Its one weakness being slightly inconsistency and a fairly high vulnerability towards Blood Moon and Magus, though it does have a lot of counterplay with main deck Boseijus, Dismembers, Force of Vigors, etc. So this deck is currently the number 1 deck in the format, and I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. Number 2, a deck that's been hovering really in the top 2, top 3 since the printing of Agatha's Soul Cauldron, Yawgmoth combo. With Fury in the format, no longer in the format, the deck is a little bit less vulnerable to mass creature removal. I mean, you still have removal spells and such, but this deck is, like most creature combo decks, is pretty good at playing through a removal spell or two. It has an okay beatdown plan, and then just feeds into the combo of Yawgmoth into your Undying creatures or Hapatra. A newer angle of attack that has kind of emerged is Fulminator Mage, kind of becoming a main deck. Combining that with Agatha's Soul Cauldron basically becomes a any creature with a +1/+1 counter is blow up target land for your opponents. Can be problematic for decks like Amulet, Tron. Really, most decks struggle if their lands are being blown up, especially after turn 2, turn 3. Definitely adds another angle of attack to this deck. Otherwise, probably the most powerful creature combo deck in the format outside of Amulet, of course, and just has a resilient plan B, has a lot of disruption and things that can get with Thoughtseize, different bullets that can get with Chord of Calling, Force of Vigor. This deck basically doesn't have that many remaining weaknesses anymore with Fury gone in the format, other than it's maybe a step slower than Amulet. Unfortunately, I'm not a master of either of these decks, so I don't know how that particular matchup plays out. I'd have to do some more research, but this is definitely the number 2 deck in the format currently. Deck number 3. Now you could say this is deck number 3, deck number 4, just depends on your local meta, but that's Rakdos. I mean, it's the best tempo deck in the format. It's been better than Murktide for a little bit. You cascade into your Rakdos, you beat your opponent down, you disrupt them with Flame of Anor, Force of Negation, Tashana's Tidebinder, and then you have Subtleties to help with matchups like Rhinos, in addition to, you know, your Force of Vigors, your Blood Moons, etc. This deck checks off a lot of the boxes to attack Amulet, which is good. It has a fairly not very high learning curve for a deck in Modern. Certainly knowing some of the tricks are a little bit relevant, but the basics of mulligan to a Cascader, Cascade into Rhinos, win, rinse, repeat is fairly simplistic. While Chalices and Drannith Magistrates are certainly a part of the format, the deck does have a lot of anti-hate with Flame of Anor being main deck, Tashana's Tidebinder being able to turn off Chalices, so this deck has certainly gotten a lot better over the last several months, and with the effective neutering of Fury, it did lose one of its bigger weapons, but still fairly reasonable deck overall, and competes for the 3rd or 4th spot in Modern currently. So, a deck that everybody thought was dead for like 2 seconds, Rakdos Scam, is number 4. If you look at the data on MTG Goldfish, ironically, it is, in the last 2 weeks, one of the more played decks in the format again. It is a deck that does give a little bit of fits to Amulet, so that certainly plays into it. And it did lose the Hogaak's game openings, but you still have triple thoughts or double Thoughtseize 4/3 Menace creature openings, so this deck does. And realistically, this deck still plays a very good mid-range game with Ragavan, Orcish Bowmasters, Dothi, Fable, now Shoulder being moved in the main deck effectively. So you're basically the best Jund deck in the format that also happens to have some broken openings that involve either Ragavan or scamming a Grief. Not as egregious as it once was, but still a fairly solid deck overall, and is certainly a deck that you will see at the top tables of any current Modern event. Number 5, a deck that did also lose Fury, but really didn't lose all that much. That would be Living End, the sister combo deck to Rhinos. Its game 1 matchup tends to be a little bit better against a wide range of the format, but you are vulnerable to a little bit more hate than Rhinos is, because not only are you fighting the Chalice Void Mirror nonsense, you're also fighting off against Leyline the Void, Rest in Peace, Endurance, etc. So this deck, game 1 is fairly straightforward. Game 2 and game 3 is probably the hardest part to master. And one of the things when I played this deck a little bit that I kind of struggled with was getting the right balance of cards to board in, cards to board out. It's a deck that kind of rises and falls much like the old Dredge deck based on how much hate you expect, and learning how to pile the deck is certainly a little bit. You have Subtleties to help play against things like Primeval Titans, Force of Negations to protect your combo. You still have Grief, so you still have most of your tools other than, you know, some of the decks used to play Fury in the main deck, maybe as a one-of or sometimes in the sideboard, but still very solid deck overall, kind of rounds out Modern as a whole. Now, where is Modern looking going into 2024? Honestly, right now it's pretty stale. The format, while the bannings did shake things up a little bit, all they really did was kind of reshuffle what the top decks of the format was. They did kind of kill Omnath as a deck, which Omnath was never a true force in the format, even without the Beanstalk. It was a solid deck for a weekend or two, would pop up every now and again, could kind of grind against the Rakdos Scam deck, was one of the things kind of propping it up, but it was never like a dominating format deck, and Scam taking a hit certainly helped shake the format up, but the format's already once again trending in a place where Scam will be the most played deck, whether it's the best deck or not. Maybe the percentages will be a little bit better balanced, and Amulet kind of being the most broken thing in the room. I would not be surprised in the future if Amulet gets hit with a ban, as it has gotten a number of tools and continued to improve. whether it be Urza Saga, Spelunking, some of the utility lands like the Mycosynth, what is the card? Mycosynth Gardens. So deck has continued to get more and more tools and hasn't really taken a hit in popularity lately. So as more and more people pick up the deck, more and more people master it and do better with it. This is certainly a deck that could take a hit. Yawgmoth could take a hit. Do I think anything needs hit right now? No, not really. And with Modern Horizons 3 somewhere on the horizon of the next 6 to 8 months, I think the format probably won't get shaken up a whole lot, depending on if there are any broken cards in the next couple of standard sets. But until Modern Horizons 3 comes out, I do think the format's kind of gonna be in a holding pattern, much like it was when Scam was the top deck of the format. You have these certain 7 to 10 decks that you can play and expect to do really well. You have another handful of, say, 6 to 12 decks that can sometimes spike an event. If you're fairly reasonable at piloting it and happen to pick the right weekend for that deck, decks like Dredge and Burn and Tron and some of these other decks that on certain weekends can do for it reasonably well. And then you're going to have a bunch of decks that used to be playable, like Creativity, Humans, etc., that just don't really cut the mustard anymore. And that's kind of where Modern is at going into the beginning of 2024. I wish there was a little bit more bright hope for the Modern format right now, but that's kind of where things are at right at the moment. Maybe some new breakthrough deck will happen and can shake up the format, but for now, things are kind of in this kind of calm down, and things are kind of shaking out where they are as far as the top decks. There might be a little bit of shake up here and there. Yawgmoth might bump Amulet Titan off its perch for a month, or etc. But I think you're going to see a lot of the same 7 to 10 decks kind of pivoting around the top 5 here for the next several months, at least till Modern Horizons 3 comes out, or another busted card like Up the Beanstalk or Agatha's Soul Cauldron gets printed. Until something like that happens, unfortunately, the format is what it is, and yeah. Anyways, if you like Modern content, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Hope to see you for our next video.